Hello and welcome to Crucible of Words for more dedicated Legacy action. It's once again our midweek meta deck slot, and there's been an Eternal Weekend tournament the weekend just gone, and this was in North America. Now, the winning deck list of that tournament was a Bant Up the Beanstalk deck splashing black for Orcish Bowmasters. Unfortunately, we can't actually play that deck on Magic Online because it ran 4 copies of Triumph of St. Catherine, which is not available on Magic Online. So instead, we are playing the second place deck, which was piloted by Jay Wojciechowski, which is a Grixis Delver deck. So, Grixis Delver, somewhat of a known entity. We've got our threats in the form of Dragon's Rage Channeler and Delver Secrets. We've got 6 1-drops here. We've got 4 Orcish Bowmasters to follow that up with, and then we have our 4 Murktide Regents here. Sorry, 3 Murktide Regents here and 2 Brazen Borrower as the sort of top end. That's sort of the standard threat package there. We've got a whole bunch of cantrips as you'd expect. We're not running anything like Portent that we saw out of the Eternal Weekend that was in Prague, where Portent was in the Rug Delver deck. We're just sort of running the old classics that you know and love: Mishra's Bauble, Ponder, Brainstorm, and Lorien Revealed. We've got a bunch of counter magic, the classic full 8 here. We have 1 Sauron's Ransom, so that's the only black card, one of the only black cards we're playing outside of Orcish Bowmasters. So we've got this, and we've got 1 Molten Collapse. So Sauron's Ransom actually gives us some card advantage. And then we have Molten Collapse, which is sometimes going to be card advantage. We might be able to get 2 form with this. It's destroy target creature or planeswalker, or destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. But if we had a permanent card put into our graveyard from anywhere, so that could be a fetch land, it could be milling something with Dragon's Rage Channeler or whatever, we can turn this on to get a 2 for 1 sometimes. So we've got a piece of actual hard removal, which is something that you don't always get in Delver decks. We've got 4 Lightning Bolts and an Unholy Heat, which is often hard removal. And then we have 2 Stifle, which is a card you see more in like the really low to the ground rug builds, like before the questing druid was a thing. But I'm always interested in trying to stifle people out. But we only have 2 Stifles, we only have 3 Wastelands, so we have less resources to try and actually hem in our opponent's mana. But again, Stifle has lots of really interesting targets. In the meta at the moment, Leyline Binding is everywhere, so being able to stifle Leyline Binding trigger is a pretty nice way of countering that effect. Mana base wise, we've got full 4 Volks and 3 Tropical Islands. We're not running any basics. We're not running any Mystic Sanctuaries. So that's the deck. Sideboard wise, we've got a bunch of tools that you'd expect really. Things like Counterbalance, Blast of different colours, a bit of graveyard hit and Surgical. Only 2 Surgicals though. And there's no Grafdigger's Cage, which is quite a common one you see in Delver decks. We've got Flusterstorm. There's a bit more interaction with opponents trying to play multiple spells on a turn. Got a Fury if we need a bit more removal. It's a good way of sweeping things. We've got a decent density of red cards as well, with Molten Collapse adding to that slightly. And a bit of Null Rod action for artifact decks and 2 Meltdowns. And we got Price of Progress for like the lands matchup and stuff. So we got some good tools to bring in. I imagine like we don't have, like we do have a few like very narrow cards like the Null Rod and the Meltdown and stuff. But we have just a lot of stuff that's going to have use in various matchups that we can bring in. So right, this is the deck, and it was piloted by Jay Wojciechowski. I looked up how to pronounce that, and I hope I've got that right. I put in a few Google searches to try and get that one nailed, so apologies if it's wrong, but here we are, and let's jam some Legacy with the second place deck from the massive Eternal Weekend North America tournament. If you're looking to play Legacy on MTGO like me, why not try Card Hoarder? They're a rental service that I personally use, and I found them better than other rental services that I've used in the past, so why not give them a try? We are on the play for round 1. We don't have a turn 1 threat. We do have a turn 2 threat, if that's going to be a thing we want. Got a little bit of hard removal. This is kind of a slower, grindier hand than I would necessarily want, because we are more on the tempo spectrum. I think a turn 2 Bowmaster is acceptable, though. So we'll lead off with a Scalding Tarn here, I think. All our fetch lands get all of our dual lands that we're playing, so it shouldn't really matter. So we can play Molten Collapse on turn 2. Or we can play the Bowmasters, or we can throw out a Wasteland if we think that's going to be important to us. Alright, Mox Diamond. That's a target that we can shoot with a Molten Collapse. So we're looking at green-white depths, I would say, because the Sejuri Step isn't in lands, the general rule. So we're going to play in Reclaimer here. Nope, 2 mana. Was this going to be a Bowmaster? Sylvan Library. So we can't actually blow this up. We can blow up the Mox Diamond, but not the Sylvan Library. We can shut the Sylvan Library down using our Orcish Bowmasters, though, which I think is what I'm in the mood to do. So then we go and get black here. We're going to get red here. And we just jam this now. So the Sylvan Library will not be drawing them cards. Or at least it can draw them cards, but the cost is significant. We could have just sniped out that Mox Diamond, but I think it's better to get the pressure and turn off the library. And then we can pressure our opponent with Molten Collapse. Okay, so they just have the upkeep. Plow. Yeah. Alright, so we like to try and Molten Collapse a creature and a Mox Diamond, and then also Wasteland a land this turn. That would be pretty good, and then we're getting towards dropping a Murktide, although it's not going to be the largest Murktide, because we don't have lots of instants and sorceries in our graveyard as of yet. Alright, so they paid a bunch of life to draw those extra cards, which is probably not amazing for us. So we're going to lose a red source, I believe, here. No, they've gone off the black, okay. Most Delver decks tend to be base blue-red, so I think they're trying to take us off the splash colour there. Right, so let's ponder. Another land that we unfortunately can't use right now. If we wanted to, we can't get both of these cards. If we want to have the Force of Will, we need to... what are we liking? We're likely to Force of Will here. Yeah, this is quite an awkward selection of cards. Like if we play out the Underground Sea here, what does that actually do for us? I guess it gives us Borrower on the next turn if we want it as well. With Dragon's Rage Channeler. Sure, we'll put them like this. Not a big lover of how that turn went. Guess we'll play our Wasteland and hide our coloured source here. So we can Borrower and Wasteland next turn. By playing the Underground Sea, we can represent something like a Fatal Push or possibly a Stifle. By not doing that now, it means we protect a blue source if we like get double Wastelanded somehow with like crop rotation and Wasteland and things. They're the flagstones. We're going to see a knight here. A crop rotation. Alright. It's just going to be a basic plains and a land of their choice. What land are you going to get, opponent? A Wasteland. Sure. Yep, so we've hidden the blue source here. They've got Life from the Lame here. They have an Orcish Bowmasters. That's a pretty good one. I do not feel very happy about this game. Like, we can make a very small Murktide, but it's not really worth it. And now this Dragon's Rage Channel on top of our library is rubbish. Bouncing this does stuff, but not a lot of stuff. I think we're probably done here. I think the library just has us beat. But we'll play a turn or two. But I'm expecting to scoot this one up pretty quick. Then we should have mulliganed to a turn 1 threat hand. Like, I wouldn't have kept just a turn 2 Bowmasters on the draw. But I think on the play it was acceptable because they play a mana dork, we kill their mana dork. Okay, so they have a knight. We know the top card of our library is a Force of Will. Which doesn't really help us out here. We can Force of Will the knight on the way back down. But we are in a losing race right now. Right, let's Petty Theft the knight. We can either pitch our Ransom or our Murktide. I think we're probably going to pitch the Ransom rather than the Murktide, because if we get any blue source we might be able to put a reasonable Murktide into play and try and clock with that. Right, they didn't take any additional cards. There is a Savannah. No point going after this sort of stuff with the Wasteland when we know they've got Dark Depths and things. Right, so let's counterspell this. I think we pitch the Ransom and try and take over the game with a Murktide. We can make a 5/5 Murktide if we draw a blue source. They've got another knight. No, they've only got white here. Unless they're going to play another land. Green Suns for 1. Can't do much about that. It's probably going to be Elvish Reclaimer, which is kind of like a worse knight, but it's still pretty good in this position. Okay. So if we don't make Murktide this turn, they can Paducah Bog and just cut off as an option for us. If we find Fetch Down, we could maybe hit the Reclaimer and the Mox. And then have a bigger Murktide after that. Or we can just hit nothing here. Alright, let's see if our opponent goes for anything. Right, if they get a bog here, then I think we scoop. Alright, let's see how bad this is going to be. They could put a Dark Depths into play pretty soon. Okay, they're just getting a Wasteland here. Yeah, that's more than enough for me to pack it up. Alright, so we're in the Green-White X Depths matchup. Yikes. This is going to be a tricky one. We don't have amazing tools for this. I don't even know if we're boarding anything. Fury is reasonable. We can take out some of the annoying things. Stifle is quite nice because they're sacking their own lands. And we can say oops to them. I think we do need our counter spells here. The bolts and things taking out the Reclaimer is nice. Bouncing a Merit Lage token is fine. I think we're probably just going to trade 1 Daze for a Fury here. Like, there's arguments for a lot of other options here, but I think our best plan is to execute the classic Delver plan here. Alright, I'll keep this and I can ponder off of our Underground Sea. Looking for more land drops. We've got their Reclaimers covered. We've got enemy Bowmasters covered with our own Bowmasters. But the thing about Bowmasters is it's not really a threat. It's kind of a weird disruptive element that gets chip damage in. A Daze and a Force of Will. Okay. I think we'll put the Volcanic on the bottom, put the Daze in our hand. That's more likely to be useful in the immediate future. And then if this is no good, then we can always pitch it to a Force of Will. Alright, so we're just going to Lightning Bolt this, so we don't need to Daze. So Bowmasters is probably going to be our answer to an opposing Bowmasters, but if we play the sort of longer, grindier game, that favours our opponent because of the way their deck's built. So I already don't like our spot here. And no play from our opponent, interesting. So we got another land, just keep making lands. And passing. This feels like an end-to-turn Bowmasters from our opponents, which we can then Bowmasters back. Right, let's get rid of their Bowmasters while the getting's good. They could choose to do some sort of crop rotation for the Jury Step if we let them untap. So this way we're just saying no to Bowmasters, makes all of our cantrips better in our deck, which is a core part of what our deck's trying to accomplish. An Orcish Bowmasters from our opponent here. How important actually is this? So if the Bowmasters dies, that's 1, 2, 3 cards. This could be 4, 5, 6, 7. So we could just play a big Murktide and protect with Force of Will. So we let this come in, then we can Lightning Bolt it away. That seems fine to me. Yeah, you can have a bigger Orc army. I think it is better to just take the 2 here and just clear this Bowmasters for future cantrips. Let's try this. Legolas's Quick Reflexes. Alright. Like, it's not ideal, but it does mean that we still get to make our Murktide. And can we back up with Force of Will and Daze. And now we have the biggest game in town with 2 layers of protection for it. This is a 3-turn clock. This is more what I'm about. I will not like you to have a Source of Plowshares on our guy. We got another plow. Sylvan Library. Nope, that will help them find an answer. We should have bounced our Underground Sea here to protect that colour. But now we are in an okay spot. We can take them off of black mana, which could be a removal colour for them. No point hitting their flagstones. Alright, let's bash for 6. If we want to get racing, we're going to win this race. It's a case of, do they find an answer to our Murktide before it kills them? And that's basically the ball game. Thespian Stage. Alright, a 2020 is a pretty good answer to a Murktide Regent. What is this? Green Sun Zenith for 1. This is probably going to be for Elvish Reclaimer. Can't Lightning Bolt that one. This can find them maybe a Maze of Ith. A Wasteland. Interesting. Right, I think we attack here. So definitely playing out our Wasteland. The question is, do we just Wasteland the Thespian Stage now? Because they can just hold up Reclaimer for ages around it. Or we can try and Wasteland them if they have a Maze of Ith. If that's what they go for. But they can always Wasteland our Wasteland and then do stuff in response. I think the safest bet here is just take that out. Now obviously they're just going to Reclaimer away their flagstones, but it's not going to give them easy access to a Dark Depths this turn. Alright, we're in. Excellent. So Dazes look a lot worse on the draw. So maybe we could run something like a Counterbalance here. But then it gets a bit tricky. Like, we can have Surgical Extraction and just get rid of all those Wastelands and maybe mess with our opponent at a crucial moment with their Reclaimer or their Knight. That's certainly an interesting option we can go. Price of Progress can do some damage if we're into like a racing situation. But again, I'm not a big lover of that. Force of Negation, we can hard cast that on some sketchy things. But again, I just don't really like it. This is tough in terms of what we're supposed to bring in for this last one. Okay, we'll have 1 Surgical Extraction. And then maybe 1 Price of Progress. It's a red card, so it pitches to Fury. But sometimes it can just completely swing a race in a way that our opponent isn't expecting. Again, we're not having these 1-drop threat hands, which is really what I want in this matchup. I think I still keep it, but I would rather be... Like, we only have 6 1-drop threats. So we are playing more towards a late, like, Okay, so they're not playing a 1-drop. That's good for us. That gives our opponent a bunch of things to think about. So I think we're supposed to lead out on the Volk, even though we're a base red deck, base blue-red deck. I think the ability to have a black sword when we've got a hand like this is really important. So we'll crack this now so we get to draw the card, have a little bit of information, and also get to play around Bowmasters, because they can't play Bowmasters in response to the draw trigger because they only have 1 land. Another Bowmasters. Okay, I hope Bowmasters is going to be good. I don't think it is in this matchup. I think it's something we're playing and it will take out their Bowmasters, but it's not really where I want to be. But if we can grow one big Orc army, that'll be okay. Right, they're cracking both their fetch lands. No Fear of Stifle. 2 mana. Green Sun Zenith for 1. How do we actually deal with the Elvish Reclaimer here? I don't think we do. I think we have to Force of Will this. Question is, are we getting rid of a Murktide? I think we are getting rid of Murktide for now. I don't think we want an Elvish Reclaimer. We don't have a clean answer to it. If we had a Lightning Bolt or something, then I would feel differently. Alright, another Force. That's acceptable. Because we have so many Bowmasters, I don't mind being the first one to play a Bowmasters in this turn cycle. So if I Bowmasters here, then they Bowmasters back. We can choose to Force of Will if we want. I don't think we do want. We say that for something like a Knight. So they're going to Bowmasters now, kill our Bowmasters. We'll untap, attack. If they block, we Bowmasters. If they don't block, then... The one thing I'm worried about here is Legolas's Swift Reflexes. That could jam us up a little bit. But I don't think they'll block here. I don't think they want to trade their Orc army here. I could be wrong. Oh, they do. This is a really telegraphed Legolas's Swift Reflexes. So I'm going to ping their face to make sure our trigger resolves so that we get 2-2 and trade here. Oh, sorry, so we eat this in combat. Because if we target this and they Legolas's Swift Reflex it, then this, we won't get the +1/+1 counter on our Orc army. So I think that is the heads-up play. Your opponent's given us information, right, by playing the Savannah out. So we should use that information. Now, they might not have the Swift Reflex. They might have just baited us and we could have taken this Bowmaster. We have another Bowmasters down the line that we can throw out. We've also got this Force of Will. And we can start doing Sauron's Ransom stuff soon too. Like, we're not in a terrible spot. A Lorien Revealed. Interesting. Right, let's just start serving with the Orc army here. I don't think we're going to ping for 1 extra damage. Like, we've got 2 plays we can hold up here as well as the Lorien Revealed. Like, we could have cycled this Lorien Revealed in our main phase. Okay, so they're making their Thespian stage into a basic so that we can't Wasteland it. So by keeping the Lorien Revealed in hand, we have more options for our Force of Will. They didn't attack with the Bowmasters. Interesting. Alright, because we have 2 black spells in hand right now, I am going to get this other Underground Sea. Let's see the piles our opponent gives us. We have potentially Endurance to worry about here, so the Ring Bearer can be useful here. They want to give us a Delver and a Mishra's Bauble. But they have a Bowmasters in play. I think I'm going to choose pile 2. Alright. And make our Orc army the Ring Bearer. Alright, happy with the Wasteland here. Ponder is certainly better than the Bauble. Right, let's get rid of this Mazavith. Like, just Swords to Plowshares are little friend. How do I feel about that? How do I feel about that? If we counterspell this, we don't have a counterspell for something scarier. I think we're supposed to allow this, as awkward as that is. So they're going to make a Mazavith over there. Sure. Try Counterbalance. If we play this first, they just plow in response. So we have an option here. We can Ponder to look for, like, to set up our Counterbalance against the things we're scared about. But it will cost us a ping off this Bowmaster. So I don't think we're supposed to do that. Maybe we'll cycle the Lorien Revealed after we get to see what's on the Counterbalance, so we can use that extra information and decide if we want to shuffle or not. Also means we might be able to play to Counterbalance 2 things at different spell costs. There is a basic Plains. Nothing from our opponent. 2 cards in their hand. A Polluted Delta. Alright, so I think the play here is... So we think they have a Legolas's Swift Reflexes. I think we're just going to attack. I think they'll trade. They've been holding us back, and they'll take the trade. Alright, they're just going to Mazavith it. Sure. Orcish Bowmasters is definitely annoying on our opponent's side of the board. If we have a 1-drop on top of our library, then we can Orcish Bowmasters and know that we can counterspell their Legolas's Swift Reflexes. But they've been telegraphing this the whole game. Right, so there's a Wasteland. Let's Island Cycle. Let's go and get red sauce. A Dragon's Rage Channeler. Not unhappy to see this one. Feels like we should have Delirium. Yep. Okay. So we've got something going on a little bit. Start surveilling a bit more. Work our way to having 2 threats that need to be Maze of Ith every turn. We need 2 Wastelands to deal with this Maze of Ith, and we only have 2 Wastelands left in our deck. So another Dragon's Rage Channeler. Let's see what happens if we attack with both of these. Do they block, or do we get to force 1 damage through? I'll take 1 damage. There we go. Let's make a DRC. We're holding up the Bowmasters, as well as being able to Force of Will something. And the Force of Will gives us... what is this targeting? One of the DRCs. So let's flip the counterbalance. Molten Collapse. Okay, so I have a 2-drop on top. How much do I care about this Source of Passion? It's annoying, but I'll live. No, we want to counter a Crop Rotation or a Knight of the Reliquary, ideally. Alright, let's just serve with both guys. Alright, we are chipping them down a little bit. We've got Force of Will, we've got Molten Collapse, we've got Orcish Bowmasters. We know they've got a Legolas as well. We don't know they've got a Legolas as Quick Reflexes, but it just seems incredibly obvious that they do. Because that's one of the cards they wouldn't be playing in this spot, and they kind of telegraphed it much earlier. A counterbalance on this. Interesting. Well, let's see if we get the free counter. Surgical Extraction. Let's cast the Bowmasters now. Now that we know that we can counter Legolas' Swift Reflexes. Let's take this out. Now we have to decide what to do about this Knight. So if we suspect Legolas' Swift Reflexes, we need a 1-drop on top to make that happen. I think we just say no to this now while we can. I don't think we want this. I think we're just looking for threats at this point. Try and close this game out. Now we can actually apply a bit more pressure. But we are under the threat of Marit Lage. We do have 22 life though, which is an important amount. Right, so now we get to actually cast our Ponders. A Wasteland, you say? I will put that on top of my library. We don't want this. We don't want this. We do want the Wasteland. We'll go to attacks. There will Maze of Ith, and then we'll Wasteland their Maze of Ith once it's tapped, because then it can't become a basic. Sequencing, pretty important there. We don't want the top card of our library, but if our opponent plays a Mox Diamond, we'll take the free counter spell on it. Although they're unlikely to play a Mox Diamond because we have them pegged for having a Legolas' Swift Reflex in hand that we've kind of just played around this whole game. Alright, they've scooped it up. I'm pretty sure they had the Reflexes in hand. We'll never know, but the plays we did around it, if we had played right into it, we probably would have lost this game. So I think it was fair to play around, and our opponent gave us information that it was probably there, and we come away with the win. Let's go to round 2. Alright, welcome to round 2. We're on the play. We don't have a second land, but we have a Channeler and a Tarn. So we can play the Channeler, then we can Bauble. It seems all good to me. People are very unlikely to Wasteland if you lead out on a threat, because then they could end up just very far behind. And if we get to untap, we can Ponder, look for a threat. We also have a Force of Will for emergency problems. I like this hand. This is more classic Delvery. Here comes the DRC. Let's Bauble. A Borrower. A creature type is actually a hard one to get into a graveyard, so I'm going to jam that in there right now. And this will be Artifact. I think I would like an additional card, so we've got more chance of hitting a different blue card to pitch to Force. So I would rather have... And also this gives me information about what our opponent has in case it's something we need to... Okay, Mystic Forge. We're on the Mystic Forge combo deck, so our Force of Will is going to be pointed at a Mystic Forge or the One Ring. A Lorien Revealed is our second land drop, so that's good. Urza's Saga. Would like to find a Wasteland in that case. Manifold Key, yep. So this is Urza's Saga is the thing that I'm actually most scared of right now. So we're not going to Lorien Reveal, we're going to Ponder for a Wasteland here. And that will put a fourth type in our graveyard and we can attack for 3. Another Force of Will, not unhappy to see that. Come on, let's find a Wasteland. Double Force of Will is pretty good in this matchup, but the Urza's Saga is what I'm most worried about. I'm going to put this into our graveyard. Just looking for a Wasteland. Brazen Borrower can kind of deal with the guys, but I'm not really interested in these Dazes. Then we're going to any order and shuffle. Right, it was not the one we were looking for. But we do have Delirium, so we can start bashing away. If our opponent does one ring stuff, we can put Bowmasters into play for that. So I'm probably going to be cycling this Lorien Revealed. Unless there's a situation where they have a 3-3 Saga in play that we can do something about. Ancient Tomb, we're happy to see that. That gives us a lot of free damage on our opponent. So I will Island cycle this to get a black source. So we can guarantee a Bowmaster if we want it. Our DRC flying is very handy here. Let's go to attacks. We'll play out our Underground Sea. So, not a big fan of Shadow Spear in our near future. So this is 4-4, so we don't get to Lightning Bolt this. But we have some very potent sideboard cards for this matchup and the ability to find them with Dragon's Rage Channeler and all of our cantrips. So, we get to improve a lot in the post board, where our opponent just gets like defense grids, I think, is basically all they get. They made the right choice of going into constructs, but they got a key rather than a Shadow Spear. So I don't mind that. Right, we'll take 6 this turn. We can chump block it with a Borrower token next turn. A Bowmaster's token next turn if we need to. End step, I will Lightning Bolt our opponent. Get to see what the next card is. A Bauble. What does that actually do for us here? It mills us a bit, but it's going to go in the graveyard anyway, so we might as well put it into the graveyard now. That is one Surveil, but it's a slow trip. A Brainstorm. Another Lightning Bolt. Okay, I'm down for that. That does change the maths. And go back 2 more Lightning Bolts. Okay, so we get to win right now with Force of Will backup. Okay. Go attacks. Bash for 3. Put our opponent to a lowly life total. Just try Lightning Bolt upstairs. We'll leave this on top. It doesn't matter, we're about to shuffle anyway. I doubt they're going to have 2 counter spells they can fire off us here. Alright, so we got game 1, which is not always what you expect to happen, so that's good news for us. Meltdowns and Null Rods in. I think that means Bauble's out. Counterbalance and Force of Negation also look good here. They do play some amount of blue spells, we don't know how deep. Because we saw the Mystic Forge, you know they're not on the Tony Scarponi deck. Molten Collapse can blow up some of their stuff for sure. The Unholy Heat doesn't feel great. I don't mind burning stuff. Stifle's got some useful targets here as well. I don't think we need Sauron's Ransom. We're not going super long with the games. Bowmaster's good. Daze, not so good. But I think we still need to keep a number on the play here. They don't really have that many lands for us to do Price of Progress things. I think we're just playing around all the usual bits and pieces, really. Let's just jam in with this. I think it's fine. Our opening hand does not have what you describe as mana, so we will be throwing this one back. Alright, this has one of our key sideboard cards. A little bit of permission, but it's very soft permission, but it gets better with a Null Rod. We will keep this. We're probably not in the market for Murktide Regent right now, although second Daze is also pretty bad. Let's chuck the Daze back. If we can fire off a bunch of cantrips, then the Murktide becomes a good way of closing the game out. A defense grid. Alright. Just as well we threw that Daze back. A Mox Opal. A Lotus Petals. They have Metalcraft. A Volcanic Key and then nothing else. So we're going to blank a lot of our opponent's turn if we get one more turn here. So I think we are in Ponder mode here. We are just looking for another mana source. So this is any order and shuffle. Right, so we found the second mana source. We need our opponent to not kill us this turn. They could do like the One Ring and then tap it once and that will give us a clock. Okay, Basalt Monolith, this can let them mill their entire deck if they have the little orb, the Mesmeric Orb. Or it's just a bunch of mana. Karn would be a disaster here. Ugin, that's pretty disaster-esque. Yep, so they're going to get a stream of 2/2s now. We get to shut down a large section of their deck here. But this thing's pretty good. It can't blow up our Null Rod because this only blows up colorless permanents. But it can blow up any creatures we play. There's a Mystic Forge. I'm going to start getting beaten down by these little tokens. This is a reasonably nice pivot. It gives them something that doesn't get shut down by all the artifact hate. Alright, we'll play this out. Play this Brainstorm. We're looking for some more business here. Put into the graveyard. Just fuel that graveyard right up so we can get multiple threats going. Some lands. I'm relatively interested in those. These Force of Wills are pretty bad. Daze is really bad. And then it's probably just one of the forces. Don't really have much else that we can do there. And we can shuffle this away. Next turn. Our opponent should win this game just off the back of a turn 2 Planeswalker. But it's possible we can make a comeback here. The One Ring. This doesn't do anything while we have the Null Rod. It gives them a turn where they don't take damage from anything though. Alright. The damage that they're putting on us from their little 2/2s is definitely mounting up. It's like Super Bitter Blossom over there. And whenever these die, they get to draw the cards. Our upkeep will crack this because we don't want the cards we have on top. Let's get Black Source. A Stifle. It'd be 4 mana to fire off a Stifle here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we could play a Murktide. Really achieve that much for us because they'll just Ugin the Ineffable. But I don't think we have any better options right now. We'll pay the most amount of mana that we can. That way we've got more fuel for the next one when that eventually comes along. Another defense grid. Yep, okay. So Stifle is no longer going to do anything here. I guess we could draw Meltdown and everything's back on the table, but we'd have to take out our own Null Rod to melt everything down, which might not be worth it here. Dismember. Yep. Alright. Now colourless spells are very cheap with the Ugin around as well. So we're bashing us for 6, so we die next turn basically. Or we have to start chump blocking. How are we going to go about winning this one? Probably not like that. I think we can scoop this just to the Ugin here. Alright. Do we want to do anything different on the draw? Oh, sorry, on the play. Daze becomes slightly better. Like Fury didn't look terrible on that board, but I still don't think that's where I want to be. Do I like Daze more than I like Stifle? I don't think so. I'm going to run it like this. Hopefully we get a nice Molten Collapse play at some point. I would prefer a turn 1 threat here, but we've got some useful cards here and ways of trying to find our really, really useful cards. Opponent's mulligan to 6. So we're going to start off with an Underground Sea, I think, into the Ponder. Lightning Bolt, Daze, these are okay cards. I'm not in love with that many of them though. I like the Daze. Drawing the Lightning Bolt is acceptable. This means we can Daze the defense grid rather than Force of Negationing it. So we can save our Force of Negation for a bigger Haymaker later on. Does slow us down a turn. There's an Ancient Tomb. There's a Lotus Petals. They're playing around the Daze here. There's a defense grid. We have to counterspell this, otherwise we never get to counterspell anything again. If we pitch the Daze here, that's 3 cards, 4 cards, 5, 6. So we'll have a Murktide soon. Yeah, I think we'll pitch the Daze. Right, so top card of our library is a Lightning Bolt, which isn't really what we're after. We've got options, but they're all kind of instant speed options, so I think we're just going to hold here. Like, we could have Brainstorm fetch for a 1-drop. That's a play available to us there. But I'd rather get our Brainstorm to see as many fresh cards as possible. A Grim Monolith. Yep, that's a lot. A Mystic Forge. This is an awkward one. So we know the top card of our library. Are we cracking? I think we're cracking here for a red source. And then we're casting a Brainstorm to see a maximum amount of cards. A Stifle, a Daze, a Bowmasters. Not the biggest selection of hits I've ever seen in my life. I guess we'll put back the Bowmasters and the Murktide. We can't really Daze this. They've got 1 mana floating and a Lotus Petal. But if they play some more spells, we might be able to Daze one of those. I am not particularly happy with how this game is going right now, as you've probably guessed. Sure, you can exile top card of their library. They've exiled an Otawara. They have no follow-up play. I don't think it's worth just firing off a Lightning Bolt here. So I'm going to draw Murktide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we want to keep up the Stifle, we can't do that. But I think it's best just to get a clock going. If we'd have lightning bolted here, we would have had a slightly bigger Murktide. So I think that might have been a better play here. This is a 6/6, so it doesn't die to dismember. The reason I like the lightning bolt is because it gives us surprise damage. But I think if we'd just fight off them for +1 damage on our Murktide, that makes more sense, to be honest. Alright, something big is coming our way. The One Ring. Yeah, that's a pretty good one. We can't daze that. We can stifle it later on though. And the Bowmasters can do some real work on it too. We can stifle like additional copies of the One Ring later down the line. There's another Bowmasters, no point attacking, so we'll pass the turn. When our opponent activates their One Ring, we will play our Orcish Bowmasters. They'll probably play a bunch of stuff with Mystic Forge first. Yep, there's a Mox Opal. Daze really not going to be doing anything for us today. Manifold Key, that's pretty good. A Grim Monolith. A Volcanic Key. A lot of One Ring activations here. I think we're going to let them have the first one. And then when they untap and do the second one, or if we keep letting them go until they get like a really big One Ring activation, then power it out. We kind of bait our opponent into it here. So they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. So they could potentially do a ring for 4, and that just gives us lethal damage next turn. Right, they're going down to 9 to use their Mystic Forge. There's another Manifold Key. I'm untapping the Grim Monolith. Okay, that's interesting. I'm untapping the One Ring. Right, I think we've found our spot. So what they can do here is untap it in response. But that doesn't work out amazingly for them then, because the draws are already on the stack. We got Dismember for this. Certainly not free to Dismember this. I suppose they can use their Lotus Petals, so it uses, yeah, that's what they're doing. Okay, so I need to find a One Ring here. Stay alive, which I believe is their plan. But if they spend one more bit of life, then this Lightning Bolt can finish them off. And so far, the Lightning Bolt, if we'd have exiled it to the Murktide, it wouldn't have made any difference because we wouldn't be doing any damage with our Murktide. Like, our Murktide's either going to be lethal now or it isn't, whereas having a surprise bolt might be pretty good. So we've got 3 mana in the pool, 2 petals up, 4 mana. What is this going to be? Another copy of the ring, I suppose. Which one are they going to keep? Paradoxical Outcome. Wowzers trousers. So if we daze this, that does cost them a Lotus Petal, which is one of their key pieces of starting mana. So I think this is actually worth doing here. Because now they can't just play out a Grim Monolith. Oh, they had another Lotus Petal they drew. Sure. Like, it was likely they were going to draw something good. But now they can play the Mox, they can play out a Monolith, and just keep going. Like, we do have Lightning Bolt plus Bowmasters, which is enough damage to kill our opponent. So maybe instead of Daze in there, we just need to try and draw a land. It's certainly a different option you could take. But our opponent can probably kill us this turn, so I think it was right to try and disrupt that in any way we could. So they might go for a One Ring line here just to stay alive for another turn. And then try and kill us on the following turn. Right, so they got a Manifold Key, which can then untap a Grim Monolith, which nets the mana. Yep. They can play the One Ring here with 1 floating. Right, another key, so they can do the whole untap and do this. Hugin the Ineffable. Sure. This makes the One Ring cost less, makes Grim Monolith free, which is a pretty good cost to play for the old Grim Monolith. And they're playing cards off the top of their library with Mystic Forge here. Right, so not killing our Murktide. I'd be very surprised if we didn't see the One Ring come into play this turn. Unfortunately, we don't have the mana to stifle that. Karn the Great Creator. Can they get us with the Lattice this turn? Monolith taps for 3. They've got a Lotus Petal. We can attack the Karn. Right, so here's just the One Ring. Sure. They're drawing a card. So our Lightning Bolt is lethal if we get another turn. 2 mana up. Another copy of the One Ring. Alright, so our Lightning Bolt isn't lethal next turn because they're keeping the one without any counters on. Now, they might draw with this one as well, but I doubt it. They're probably pretty aware of Lightning Bolt as a thing that we can point in their face. What are they going to reveal from outside the game? Aetherflux Reservoir. Alright. They're going to win the game next turn, I believe. We need to have our opponent lose a life somewhere along the lines. We need to draw a Dark Ritual, which isn't in our deck. we can kill off the Karn. What does Pondering do for us here? We go shields down on Stifle if we cast Ponder, but we might find a Force of Will that we can use on the Flux Reservoir. However, our opponent is probably going to... so we can't deal them damage. So what we're going to do is we're going to kill the Karn. And then... Can't even Ponder into anything too good here. But I think that Ponder's going to be better than the Stifle, because Flux Reservoir is just going to win in the game doing its thing, right? We need to counterspell this. We can't try and stifle the other abilities. So this is a Ponder looking for a counterspell of some description. We found a counterspell and a lethal burn spell. Obviously, if our opponent taps their One Ring, they're probably not going to be tapping the One Ring here. But if they tap their Mystic Forge, I doubt our opponent's going to 3 life if they can avoid it. What I'm not looking forward to here is our opponent playing a defense grid first, because then we don't really get to do anything. All right, there is the One Ring activating. Well, I'm not going to stifle this activation. There's a Basalt Monolith. There's a Voltaic Key. I'm tapping the One Ring, so they're digging until they find the defense grid here. I'm hoping that they get complacent and use the Mystic Forge, but our opponent doesn't look like they're playing very complacently right now. So, all right, the Yugen's exile a card, which gets them a card deeper in terms of what Mystic Forge can offer. They've got a whole bunch of untaps available to them here. Yep, the One Ring goes deeper. Not many cards left in their library there. There is the defense grid. We have to counterspell this and represent another counterspell. Hopefully they'll use the Mystic Forge to dig. Oh, they didn't. Alright, we'll put them to 1. And hopefully... I don't think it's going to make any difference with the Mystic Forge. They've only got 3 cards left in their library. Wonder how they get up to 50 life here. They've only got 3 cards left in their library here. Maybe the Orcish Bowmasters on that turn does more. But our opponent drew so many cards, I had to imagine they had the answer. So they got 13 cards in hand, no cards in library. Void Snare, sure. They're now on 51 life, so they can just kill us whenever they want. Alright. Close margins, but then they just snowball out of control if you miss those margins. And if we'd have had 1 more mana a turn earlier, I think we'd have been alright. We would have been able to, that spot where they ended up at 4 life, we might have been able to win the game instead if we'd had more mana. Also, the turn where we didn't Lightning Bolt and we could have grown our Murktide, that would have put them on 1 or made them more apprehensive about spending more lives, so we might have been able to win with the Bowmasters. So I think not bolting there was a mistake in the end. Whether or not it makes a difference, I don't know. It makes our opponent play differently, I think. Alright, let's go to round 3. I don't like this hand. We're an aggro deck, effectively. We need to get something down. There's no point trying to have control spells and nothing to back up with it. A Ponder, I can live with, though. I don't think we're going to need all of these fetches, so I'm going to throw away a fetch. And begin the game on Volcanic Island. Do I want to Ponder here? Looking for a threat. I think I would rather look for a threat than hold up a Stifle here, because that might do nothing. I think I want a threat. Okay, we drew one of the things we shuffled away anyway, but it's one of the ones I'm more excited to draw, to be honest. It's a blue card and a land, so that's a nice bit of dual versatility there. Great Furnace. So probably looking at Painter here, would be my guess. Goblin Welder. We can do some pretty gross things. Actually, Stifle's not even that gross against Welder. It's good against Engineer, though. Underground Sea. I guess we're going to cast another Ponder. Our opponent thinking about Summon Spirit Guide, Pyroblast. Alright, they've kind of shown us they have Summon Spirit Guide, Pyroblast here. I like the Volcanic. I don't really want the other cards here, but I guess we can shuffle upkeep. I think we're just going to continue looking for a threat. Alright, so we found the threat. So let's go and get ourselves a red source. We have enough lands that we can pitch this Lorien Revealed if we want to. The Stifle definitely has some interesting uses here. It can be like a Time Walk if they're trying to grindstone us out on a turn. Urza Saga can certainly stop an Urza Saga trigger. Okay, now I definitely want a Wasteland. But I think we have to advance our own game plan where possible. This is kind of an awkward one without any form of... This doesn't help us, which is the annoying thing if we Force of Will this. Because of the Welder, we need to clear the Welder or something first. We do know they have the Pyroblast and Soon Spirit Guide. I made that clear earlier when they had that little pause for us. Alright, this is not great. I don't want to show them the black if we can avoid it. We're just on the passing here. Once the Ezra Saga ticks down, they'll be able to kill us. So going to be tricky. But again, this is one we have really good sideboard cards for. We just need to draw the sideboard cards. Being a 3-way sand deck instead of 4 is something we're definitely feeling when we're staring down these Urza Sagas. A Goblin Engineer. Like, we know they have the Pyroblast, so it's just a real pain here. But I guess if we do this, we at least get to Surveil. And we get the Pyroblast out of our opponent's hand. Yes, please. I would very much like that Wasteland. So this is going to get counterspelled. Yeah, there you go. But we do have the Stifle. If we want to stifle the trigger, or we can stifle the sack ability. I think we'll stifle the tutor here. Our Dragon's Rage channel is still going to be a measly 1-1. You get in the red zone there. Ah, no Painted Servant beats. Let's get this out. Get rid of those Saga. And now we're just trying to draw something good off the top. I would much rather be in our opponent's shoes right now. Fable of the Mirror Breaker. That's a big one. Yeah, it's beginning to crash with the old servant now. An Orcish Bowmasters, though. Certainly down to clown with that one. Play this out. We can ping off this Welder. What does that achieve for us? Not the most. But they don't really have any good options with it right now, so... Gone. If our Orcish Bowmasters dies and we do get a 3-3, we just don't have the pressure now, which is where I'm feeling it. How bad is this Fable going to be? Because if we wait later to do the Bowmasters, they could just loot away something for Welder to put into play that turn. Right, so the Shaman's coming in. They decide not to loot as well because we have an Orcish Bowmasters. So it's worth getting the Bowmasters in. And they don't have to loot until the ability is resolving. Alright, 3 mana, Brazen Apprentice. Yeah, they're just playing more powerful cards than what our cards are right now. We're going to need some help. Orcish Bowmasters. How much do you help? Alright, we can attack with this. This is a very telegraphed attack. It's very obvious we have another Bowmasters here and they shouldn't be blocking. They did not block. Alright, so we can use the ping on blocks. But they're going to start copying their Goblin Engineer soon, and that's going to be enough to win the game. There is a Lotus Petal. Our opponent is so far ahead right now. We don't have any good catch-up mechanics like they do. Okay. So attacking with a bunch of things. Engineer is alive. I'm trying to think how we win this game. I honestly don't think we win this game. I think we just go to sideboarding. I think our opponent's too far ahead. And these matchups can be quite long and grindy, and I'd rather not waste time when we're so far behind. Right, Meltdowns, I would like this Hydroblast as well. Counterbalance is interesting. And so extractions are also interesting. I don't really like Force of Will in this matchup because of all the Pyroblasts they have. The Bauble's not great if we're bringing in the old Null Rods. Daze. We're on the play, so Daze is not so bad. Stifle, again, we've definitely found some uses for it. Is this a Sauron's Ransom matchup? They can go a little grindy. How do I feel about Borrower? It's good against Construct tokens. I'd rather have something like Dress Down. That's not an option we have, unfortunately. Sure, I think we'll take out a Daze as well. Now, some people like to bring in Pyroblast, but I don't think that's a good way of doing it because your opponent's only going to turn on your Pyroblast when they want them to. We have a Hydroblast, we have a Wasteland for the Saga, we have Bowmasters to kill a Welder. This seems acceptable to me. Counterbalance just trades better into Pyroblast than Force of Wills do. Especially when they have Searing Spirit Guide sometimes, so at any point your spells can get Pyroblasted. Alright. We have a Polluted Delta. We would like to get a Black Source with this. Urza Saga. Alright, so we're going to be wastelanding this in the very near future. Meltdown. Happy to see that. Powerful sideboard cards showing up when we want them. Right, so we've got Hydroblast open here. Next turn we can drop the Counterbalance, or we can kill like a 1-1 Goblin if that's what happens. Alright. Feels like our opponent is holding up a Pyroblast here. I don't think we need to play into it. I think we just pass here and then try and Bowmasters one of their guys if they play anything. I just don't want to play into a really obvious Pyroblast if we can avoid it, especially when we have a Hydroblast. Now if we draw a blue source, we can play that and just force our bits and pieces in here. Right, so we can jam this, and then if they Pyroblast this, we can Hydroblast back. We have 2 black spells here, so I do think we probably want another black, although red is just better for us a lot of time. It's a red source here. I think it's worth getting the counterbalance in. Like, we will need some cantrips and stuff to make these work, but we have a lot of artifacts covered. Right, we're going to see here, Brayer's Apprentice maybe. Fable of the Mirror Breaker. That's a good thing to have, that we could have used our spell on, our Hydroblast on. Let's use the ability. Lightning Bolt. Okay. Not the one we wanted. Yep, and now they know they can just play these out into the counterbalance. Yeah, our opponent feels quite far ahead to me. So we know we're drawing a Lightning Bolt this turn. We can Orcish Bowmasters to stop our opponent from drawing cards. We do that in the upkeep so that we get to block this with a 1/1 and kill it. The life total here isn't that important right now, so we're just going to ping this for 1. Yeah, I'm probably not going to use a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So now they can't attack and make a treasure unless they trade off their Goblin Shaman token. They could just hard cast a Fury here, and that's pretty strong. We do have 5 drops in our deck, like our own Fury. A Counterbalance. Let's reveal from the Counterbalance. Scalding Tarn. Sure, there is a Painter's Servant. A Goblin Engineer. We know that there's a Scalding Tarn on top of our library. Let's see what they put in, and then we can think about hitting this. A Brayer's Apprentice. So the card advantage option. I really like them to attack with the Shaman token so much. Okay, at the end step, I think we are hitting the Goblin Engineer here and trying to do a big meltdown to clean up everything else. Opponent's got 1 card in hand. Get to clean up a lot of our opponent's permanents if this works. Alright. We're still not attacking, no. Our opponent's going to accrue some good value off of this Shaman and this Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Now, given the option, I think I'd probably trade both of these to take out the Shaman. We can dump a Murktide in our opponent's lap next turn. Right, they're giving us the trade. We just don't want our opponent to have anything that they can copy. A Simian Spirit Guide. What do we got on top of our library? An Unholy Heat. I am down to draw an Unholy Heat this turn. Let's blast the Kiki-Jiki. And then let's just deploy a big Murktide. Alright. So, okay, and there's a Saga is a very nice hit for our opponent there. Now we do have a 2-turn clock. Our opponent's got some stuff going on. An Ensnaring Bridge. Okay. Let's see what it reveals. A Wasteland. I would like to keep that Wasteland on top, so I'm not going to crack this fetch. Let's see what the counterbalance reveals. A Stifle. Interesting. Do I want to draw a Stifle right now? I don't think so. Not when our opponent knows about it. Let's crack this for a black source. Alright, opponent. Right, our opponent's mixing these piles up a fair bit. Does that mean it's quite close? Or is our opponent messing with us? There's a lot of options here. It's quite a fun card. Delver and Bowmasters. Those are both threats that I like. They can do some stuff under the bridge. But maybe we're supposed to go for pile 2 in case it's got any sort of removal for the Ensnaring Bridge. Right, Channeler. So it's similar in quality to the other pile. Alright, let's have a friend. Play this because they know about it. Also gives us 5 mana for Hardcast Fury. Let's play another Channeler. 2 powerful 1/1s. Maybe we can get in a situation where we will attack and then flip them to get 6 points in. A Lightning Bolt targeting one of the Channelers. Let's see what we have on top. Aha, a Ponder. We finally countered something with our counterbalance. Who'd have thought? Let's jam this Ponder. Lightning Bolt. I'm happy to have a Lightning Bolt. Kills Painter. Fury's not bad. Don't really like the Daze. We can put that on the bottom. Then 1, 2. No, I think we're supposed to put them the other way around because now we have to wait on some of our things here. I think we're shuffling this, right? Actually. Alright, a Brainstorm. Let's use a black source for this. Let's keep digging into the graveyard, please. Bowmasters is okay, but I think we can do better. Just looking for a way of getting rid of this bridge. Molten Collapse. Doesn't quite do the thing we need it to do here. So we definitely want to fetch rather than drawing these. So we put the Murktide on top and then the Molten Collapse. So we know there's a 2-drop on top. And then we can shuffle if they play something that isn't a 2-drop. If they play a Painter, we can also just draw the Molten Collapse and just take a turn off. Is Molten Collapse better than a random draw? I don't think so. But it is nice to have. I think we should be high rolling here. So we're going to go for a fresh draw. A Wasteland. I will keep this one for when they play an Urza's Saga. And we're passing. Right, mountain from our opponent. Just in this weird little holding pattern here. Another little friend. Because they're on draw a card, play a card, we don't need to hold the Wasteland out because it's not as if the mana from the Urza's Saga is going to matter, so there's no point wastelanding it with the thing on the stack. With the first Saga chapter on the stack. Alright. Command deck. Surgical Extraction. We can get rid of Painted Servants in our opponent's upkeep, so we don't die to the Grindstone Kill immediately, but we can die to the Grindstone Kill just by them milling us out. And that's a very real worry. Interesting. But this will turn down some of their other effects. So I think we're going to take out the Painted Servant here. We can pay the mana for it, but we also get 3 Surveils here, so this is well worth doing it for the Scry 3. Ponder is a good draw. But I think we're just digging to the thing we want. Right, 3 Surveils is basically the same as casting the Ponder. Alright. Am I going to regret putting all these in the bin? Borrower. Yes, there we go. What is our opponent's one draw this turn? Nothing unexpected in here. Pretty familiar with Painter. Pretty cool deck. Alright, so drew an Urza's Saga. We have that covered. We bounce in Staying Bridge. We kill our opponent. Right. We got the game. Let's go to the final one of this round. Yeah, I really don't like a lot of our options here. Like, Daze doesn't feel great. To have 1 Force instead. We could have a Price of Progress and maybe try and burn our opponent out when they're playing a bunch of, like, Ancient Tombs and things. I think that's an acceptable approach. Not great, though. It's probably only going to be good for, like, 4 damage. But maybe it's enough to get through an Ensnaring Bridge. It's either that or a Force of Negation, because we can at least hardcast the Force of Negation sometimes. Or maybe we have the Force of Will. It's just a one-of. It doesn't feel great in this matchup. We kind of need counter spells for this matchup, but we're kind of relying on removal instead because they're permanent based. Okay, our hand has Meltdown in it and Wasteland. This hand is great. Blood Moon could be annoying, but we didn't see it in sideboarding a minute ago, so unless I somehow blanked on that one. So Hydroblast I think is better to hold up here because it can answer Fable the Mirror Breaker instead of using a Wasteland to stop the Urza's Saga tapping for mana. Yep, so they could do something like Fable here. Yep, this is exactly the line that we played for. Nope. Getting this on the stack is so much better because you don't have to deal with the fact that it splits into 2 immediately. I will play out a Wasteland and I will pass. I'd like to hold up this Hydroblast in case there's another Fable, because Meltdown kind of has a lot of the rest of the deck covered. We can do an end of turn Brainstorm if that's what we want to be. Another Fable. Another Hydroblast. Right, so now we are very much into brainstorming territory. Cast Brainstorm. Oh, I do like having Wastelands. I do not want a second Murktide. That's for sure. And do you want the second land or not? I do like having a Murktide. I think I'll put back one of the lands, deploy the Polluted Delta, and see if we can pick up anything with a Bowmasters. Like a Goblin Engineer would be ideal. There's got another one. Sorry, not an Engineer. A Goblin Welder is the one I want to actually pick up. Yeah, this is kind of annoying. They missed a land drop here. Alright, so they got another Ancient Tomb there. A Painter's Servant, you say? Interesting. With a mana spare, 1 card in hand. Alright, I think we're going to go and get a black source here and jam a Bowmasters. We're not really going to pick up any value from it, but there's not many things in their deck they actually get to kill with a Bowmaster activation. Alright, over to us. Another mana source isn't great. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We can jam the Murktide. And now what we're going to do is surgically extract whenever they try to Goblin Engineer. Because this is sacrificed as part of the cost. Whereas Welder isn't. So they can sacrifice this to get the Phyrexian Dragon Engine. We can surgically extract it. And then we've got a nice little bit of card advantage there. With them sacking their own Painter. Obviously I don't have to do this now. A Goblin Welder, you say? Well, well, well. That's the only red source available right now as well. Interesting. So we can melt down away their Painter. The Murktide. That's not really what we want. Splash for 6. So we basically need to survive one more turn here. So if we melt down for red 1, 2. And we can play out a land. I'm just debating if I want to... If they have an artifact, they can just welder in this guy right away. Interesting. Maybe in their draw step we fire off the extraction on the Painter. I think that's the harder thing for us to beat right now. I don't think we need to pay 2 life there either. But I think the ability to use a fetch land is going to be better. Alright, they're off of it. I think the reason we kept the fetch land up there is because if we have a Brainstorm, this is better than cracking it just to pay the black for this. And I think 2 life is worth not very much in this situation because we're clocking down in the air. So I think that's a fine decision. Alright, we are 2-1 going into round 4. Alright, opening hand for round 4 is a classic Delvering. We will keep this one. I think we lead out on the Delver rather than the Dragon's Rage Channeler. We can protect our red source as well as having an option of this flipping. This is never going to flip and we're not going to cast any spells until turn 2 anyway. If we draw a Force of Will or a Daze, that changes things. But I think it's a clear Delver pick here. Now they could untap and play an Orcish Bowmasters here and that would suck for us. But it puts a creature in the graveyard, which is sometimes one of the harder types for Dragon's Rage Channeler. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. If they're going to let us untap, that's interesting. Because we can stifle a Bowmaster trigger. They have to ping now if they're going to Orcish Bowmasters. Okay, we're not going to reveal that one. Right, we'll attack for 1. Bowmasters eats this up either way. But I think if they had a Bowmasters, they would have at least tried it at some point. By 4 now. Right, so we'll play out a DRC. We are holding up Stifle, which can do some work. And now the Stifle will get us some value of our Dragon's Rage Channeler. We've got Bowmasters as well for next turn. Alright, a Marsh Flats. Still just a black source. Interesting. Thought Seize. Yep, have a look, opponent. If they're reanimated, they probably take the Borrower here. I took the Stifle, that's interesting. A Bowmasters. Yep, that means they're sort of on a slightly fairer plan, so they're going to bop down our Dragon's Rage Channeler here. I wonder if they had the Bowmaster and we're just playing around the potential Stifle. We'll not reveal this. Right, let's jam our Bowmasters, get rid of their Bowmasters, get a Dragon's Rage Channeler, and pass the turn. We've got a good amount of power in play. We just need it to switch on, and then we can be bashing for 6 in the air. And that doesn't take long to win a game from that position. We've got a reload in hand with Sauron's Ransom. We have a Borrower as a little bit more damage. Alternatively, a bit of a tempo play. We can bounce their token out of the way and swing with everything when we've only got little creatures. A Doughty Voidwalker. That does not block, so that's good. Reanimate on the Bowmasters is excellent for them. We probably lose a Channeler again. We do need to flip our Delver at some point. They might hit the Delver here because the Channeler can't grow while the Doughty's in play. That'd be quite a heads-up play. No, they've gone for the Channeler. They value the selection highly. I think that's a fine thing to do. We can bounce the Orc army token out of the way. I can accept that as a thing we do. Can we flip? Yes, we can. Okay. Interesting deciding what of these plays is what I want to do. I think I want to bolt the Delphi. And then swing with these two. And then bounce the Orc army. Trading off the Bowmasters, that's interesting. That suggests to me they have another reanimate. Which means if they reanimate the Bowmasters to ping our Bowmasters, we then bounce the Orc army after it grows. So we get to save a bit more. There's a possibility they have like Bowmasters and... Okay, Liliana the Veil. That's interesting. What are you going to do with it, opponent? Each player discards a card. It's not amazing for us to bounce this and lose our Sauron's Ransom. But we have something to do with our mana, and this means that we just kill the Liliana straight up. And this will cost our opponent a card as well. They haven't played a land yet for turn though, right? So they could just play land, reanimate, and make us feel pretty grim. Archon of Cruelty. Well, that's going to be a yikes from me. So if they have Archon of Cruelty, this is 8 to reanimate. 8, 9, 10, 11. So if we attack them for 3 here, and Liliana for 1, they can't realistically reanimate this, because it'll kill them. And we might as well play out our Wasteland here. Seems unlikely that it's going to meta, but I'd rather not have it discarded by Liliana, because it could come up. It can pay for a Murktide Regent next turn, for example. We can put in this Borrower, and we have nearly lethal. If we'd have attacked them with the Orcish Bowmasters, we would have lethal this turn, so we were supposed to do that. If we're not killing the Liliana, just put the damage on. Yeah, I think that was a mistake on our part. Reanimating on the Orcish Bowmasters puts them to 6 when we have 6 power in the sky. A Doughty Voidwalker. They should be minusing the Liliana here. We flash in this because the Bowmasters can kill Brazen Borrower, but they can't kill the Delver of Secrets. So that's the better one to sacrifice here. Right, Lightning Bolt is good. That's not a Lightning Bolt. That's not what I asked for. Alright, put them dead on the next swing. What's in the exile zone? Oh, I have a Lightning Bolt over there. That's annoying. Alright, we'll play this out so we can hardcast Force of Wills if we draw them. Not that that's going to be a thing that's going to work too well into Liliana, but I think it's worth doing. The cards are not going to stay in our hand when they're going to be plusing their Liliana anyway. So we may as well have the resource than have nothing. Right, so this is going to get a Lightning Bolt, which is going to kill our Insectile Aberration. We saw that coming. But we can still draw a Lightning Bolt and kill our opponent. We're on the Mono Black Rescaminator, I believe it's people are calling it. Lightning Bolt. A Stifle. That's a very unexciting card. Because they're just going to plus their Liliana. And us paying this doesn't really make a difference because putting a counter on it is part of the cost. Entomb. Interesting. What have they got here? A Reanimate Dead. Hogak. That's pretty cool. Each player discards a card. Goodbye, Stifle. So now I can get Hogak into play. And that's a 2-turn clock. So we need to either draw... Well, we can't even draw a win condition, really, because the Liliana can just kill them. So we need to find ourselves a Lightning Bolt in 2 draws. Bowmasters does some stuff for us. Uncertain how useful it's going to end up being for us, but we'll find out. So if we ping out... I think we ping out the Bowmasters here so that we can draw some cantrips for use. That makes a lot of sense. And maybe we can put 1 point of toughness in front of a Hogak at some point and buy ourselves 1 turn, leaving ourselves on 1 life to get 1 more draw step for a Lightning Bolt. I don't believe this is that turn. If we draw Bowmasters, we kill this and then we swing for lethal. So we take the 8 this turn and then we block it next turn if we have to. Lightning Bolt. A Brainstorm. It's not a bad one. These are bad ones though. Yuck indeed. So... I think we lose here. They attack with this. I guess if they plus, then we can double block. But then this comes through. So it's 9 points of damage and we can block 2. And if we want to crack the fetch, That'll put us down to lethal. Yeah, we were close. I think this is our opponent's game. They could make a mistake here and not attack with the Orc army. I think Plus and Liliana's fine here. Okay, they're making us sack a creature, that is. It's just GG's there. Okay. So, Mono Black Rescaminator, as they call it. I would like some surgical extractions, please. Counterbalance seems fine here. Force of Negation and Flusterstorm are also fine. But the problem here is that they just play on a discard axis, which is really bad for things like Force of Will. So maybe we don't want things like Force of Will and Force of Negation. It's just not where I want to be. We do need all the removal for their Bowmasters and things like that. So I think we're just on something that looks like this. Yeah, it doesn't feel like we're really playing against matchups that our configuration is feeling amazing for. Like, our opponent's deck is kind of a combo deck, but also kind of not, in a way that Force of Will becomes less useful. Alright, we can keep this. Delver with Daze, untap, do some more stuff. The Wastelands do not feel great here. But that doesn't mean that our opponent isn't got a splash. They've got these fetch lands, maybe they'll be using them for something. Then we get red source here because you've got the Unholy Heat. Casting your spells is good. Let's jam our friend. Maybe we can flip it. I don't think we're supposed to Brainstorm in our upkeep. But if we're going to Brainstorm anyway, maybe we should. And then if we have to do any interaction, we can Daze. So our opponent is going to go to clean up in their end step. So they can discard a big scary monster and reanimate at turn 2. I think I'd rather see more cards towards something that interferes with the Atraxa. So we'll not reveal this. Alright, that's kind of an awkward one. Alright, let's Brainstorm. We have a land that we kind of want here. So I think we put back the Wasteland and the Volcanic here. Play this out. Crack this. I think we get the pressure and hope that the Daze is good enough. And then try and Brainstorm into some other stuff next turn. But if our opponent's got Grief and Reanimate, we're just going to lose here. And if we try and Brainstorm into something else, we might still lose. Whereas at least this way, if we get to another turn, our Brainstorm sees more cards and is going to be a better card in general for us. We might be able to apply some lethal pressure with it. Well, not lethal this turn, but actually a strong clock compared to what we've got right now. So please don't evoke a Grief, I guess. There's the Grief. If we Daze this and they pay, that gives us a turn without them casting Atraxa. But then we're trying to find an answer for Atraxa. If we do this and we pay, then they take the Brainstorm and we can't find an answer for anything. Yikes. No, I think we're just supposed to let this Grief hit us and then try and dig ourselves out with a Brainstorm. I think our opponent is very far ahead here. If they reanimate this Atraxa, I think it's just lights out for us most of the time. Yep, so there goes the Daze. Now we see reanimate on Atraxa. They get to draw a whole bunch of cards. We're just getting absolutely buried here. Entomb, reanimate. Not a bad little combo here. They got Trolls if they want that. Yeah, this is going to be hard to beat, this selection of stuff. So they do have bad lands. So they do have a splash. Like I thought they might. They choose Swamp, Reanimate, Orcish Bowmasters, Entomb. Swamp, Reanimate, Orcish Bowmasters, Entomb. Okay, we need to have a good turn. I think casting a Brazen Borrower would be a good way to start. Yes, I will reveal this Surge of Extraction. That's not a bad card to have. Alright, Brainstorm. Let's see 4 cards because of Channeler. Stifle. Nope, that's not the one. Where were you Surge of Extractions 1 turn ago? That's what I want to know. Bowmaster doesn't do anything. They attack. We do get to kill this with an Unholy Heat and then maybe extract it. Is that acceptable? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't think. So we need Unholy Heat and Extraction this turn. So I don't think we need the Bowmasters right now. Would I rather have a Stifle or a second Surgical Extraction? Yikes. We can make sure that this lives through a Bowmasters by putting the Bowmasters on top. So if we put Stifle and then Bowmasters, then we can get attacks here. They know about the Unholy Heat. So we extract on the Reanimate or the Hogak. They're both kind of annoying. Take the Reanimate out here first. Oh, we don't have a sorcery, do we? Oh no, I completely messed this up. Oh no, I thought we'd had a sorcery in there. Yeah, I think we've just punted this one. He likes Blood Moon as well. What a mean deck. So the next card on top of our library, we don't know what the next card on top of our library is, right? So I guess we hit the Hogak here. Do we know the next top of our library? We do, it was the Stifle that was still there. Just the one Hogak, interesting. Okay, so now this dies, and then we can finish it off with this. No, we still can't finish off with that, can we? That's the problem. Yeah, this has all gone massively wrong for us there. We needed to find a sorcery there before we started attacking, I think. Yeah, I just played that turn pretty horribly. If our opponent attacks us, they gain 7. And then they have all the life to work with there. And their sort of mediocre man plan will be good enough. Now they can Bowmasters away our creature here. They want to make us spend our Unholy Heat mana on our turn, I believe. Yeah, so what we do is, in response to this pinging our Channeler, we hit this, try and mill something useful. We could put this Daze into our graveyard for sure. Yeah, and we lose our friend. We draw nothing and we're dead. Alright. Yeah, we didn't play very well in that round. Well, in that game at least. But we were so up against it there anyway. If we'd have done the Brainstorm, we'd have found one of the Surge Extractions. We might have been able to stop what our opponent was doing. So maybe that is the play to do there. The slightly more cowardly play. But we're basically hoping they didn't have exactly Grief plus Reanimate. And then if we got to untap, then I think we'd probably win that game. That's not what happened though, so we lose. And we only had 2 Surgical Extractions to draw 2 there. So I don't think that was ideal. Like, we could have hit another counterspell maybe. So we could have to counterspell the Grief and then Reanimate. But yeah, that matchup feels tough. Feels like it's got some pretty good tools. Like the scan package is pretty good. So yeah, quite impressed with this deck. I might try and play it on the channel in the new year. Alright, let's go to the final round. We're looking for the 3-2 record. Alright, our opening hand for the final round. Kind of like this one. Channeler on the play with a Daze. And then a bunch of good spells. We wanted to find a second land, but our opponent shouldn't be wastelanding us on if we play a threat. But if they somehow deal with our Dragon's Rage Channeler and then untap and wasteland us, then we enter Dirtsville. But they won't know how good a wasteland is against us, and they also won't want to put themselves behind whilst we have a creature on board. So I would accept. I think this is a good hand to keep, despite the little risk that it may offer. Underground Sea. Careful Study. Then we counter the Enabler here. Force of Will, very much would like that for next turn. I think we go for a Ponder here. So we'll just feed a Murktide. I don't really want both of these Bowmasters, is kind of the problem. And we only get to shift one of them, perhaps. I do want one in the graveyard. So I want a threat here. So we put this into the graveyard. And then we attack for 3. And then if we Force of Will, we can take that Bowmasters off of our library this turn. Otherwise, we can, brainstorm away and do some stuff. A Bloodghast. Right, I can live with that one. So we're probably looking at a Hogak deck here. If we hit this, we get to take that Orcish Bowmasters off of the top of our library. Is that worth doing right now? I don't really... I don't really want this Bowmasters. Alright, sure. A Wasteland, I'll take that. See what you got coming up. Another Careful Study. Alright. See what we draw. I think I'm interested in counterspelling a Careful Study. Would love to find a second mana source. Or another Wasteland, especially if our opponent doesn't play a land here. If they play a land, they do get the Bloodghast back. But we were mainly sort of scrying one there. Right, so let's hit this. Like we mapped out. What is Channeler going to find us? Another Lightning Bolt. If we find a land, it's just more damage. If we find a fetch land, because we get 3 damage every turn. Alright, so they did have another land, but we took out the Careful Study there. Maybe that was a bait to try and stop us getting to carry on that. Okay, so what does this do for us? Okay, I think we attack with the Channeler here. Then we play the other Channeler because that's a guaranteed 3/3 flyer. And it makes our Lightning Bolt also Surveil 2, which is pretty bananas. Alright, they've had enough. Our 2 little counter spells early on did the work. So, I would like some Surgical Extractions, please. We don't have as much graveyard as I would like, if I'm being perfectly honest. Counterbalance can be okay here, but I think things like Force of Negation might be slightly better. We're worried, so they're going to be having Thought Seizers though. I reckon it's probably the Dazes that look bad here, and we bring in a Force of Negation and maybe a Fury here, just to sweep out a bunch of little guys. That seems acceptable. I think the Force of Negation is going to be better than the Counterbalance. If we stop their initial enabler, then we can sort of jam them up. The other option here is the Red Blasts over things like Forces. So problem is we're on the draw. So the Red Blast feels a little bit less good there. And they might not have that many blue things. I don't even know if they're running crabs yet. They might not be running crabs. We have removal for crabs anyway. Yeah, I think we're just going to go in like this. We can adjust next turn on the next game if we go to game 3. And things will be different on the play as well. Things like the Red Blast become a lot better on the play. Because we get to hit their turn 1 Careful Study. Double Murktide and the Ransom. This is like a lot of do nothing. I think we have to mulligan this. This is okay-ish. But if we have to Force of Negation on turn 1, we don't get to really do anything else. So we probably don't get to Force of Negation. This mana is not free, is it? I think we keep. And we're probably looking at getting rid of the Unholy Heat here. Which is the lower end on what I think I would be happy keeping here. Alright, no turn 1 play for our opponent. And a Brainstorm for us. That's good news. Let's carry on. So we've got the Force of Negation. We're going to see an Entomb here. Or is it going to be a Brainstorm? A Thought Scour. Sure, I think that's acceptable. A Life of Malone. Okay. And now they've got Hogak pretty much ready to go. Because they milled 2 and then they drew the Life of Malone. So if they play an Orcish Bowmasters, they do just get to make a Hogak this turn. So I think I'm very, very much unhappy with an Orcish Bowmasters coming into play right now. Feels like it's an Orcish Bowmasters though. Life from Malone. This Force of Negation lines up incredibly well here. Say no to that one. Volcanic. This is interesting. We can play our creature and potentially Brainstorm. Get some extra value on the value train. We are giving up a Wasteland for that, but I think that's acceptable. We can't answer a Orcish Bowmasters just yet, but we can fire off a Brainstorming response. Ponder, put into graveyard. No, put on top of the library because we're going to kill this and then Ponder. I think that's fine. Okay. We don't really need the Murktide just yet. And actually we want the Delver to flip next turn, don't we? So maybe we're not casting the Ponder straight away. We just play the Delver, hold up the... We Lightning Bolt, play Delver. The next turn we draw Ponder. So we put Ponder on top and then the Murktide. Sure. So then the Bowmasters kills this and unfortunately makes a Hogak. But we're trying to make an 8/8 Murktide, but I don't think we're going to be able to do that in time. So our opponent is very much larger in charge, I would say. Let's bot this one. Play Delver. Let's take out their black source. So they have black cost they've already shown us. We take them off of that. We can make a 3... So we make a 6/6 Murktide. But we're dying in 3 swings here. So this is no good. We're going to have to get this Ponder to do some work for us. If we can get an 8/8 Murktide and trade with the Hogak, that's acceptable to me. Master of Death, what does this do? Enter the battlefield, Surveil 2. At the beginning of that, if Master of Death is in your graveyard, you may pay 1 life and return it to your hand. Okay. Not kind of seen very much of. But I can see why they're running it here. The Surveil is pretty tasty. Right, so they are running Hedron Crabs. So we'll flip to this Ponder. I don't think our Murktide is big enough right now, so we need to Ponder. So Extraction is too late here. Although we do kind of need it later, which is a weird one. So if we put the Delta at the bottom, then the Extraction, then the Bolt. How many things we have? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's still not going to be enough, is it? To make an 8/8. So we have to say Shuffle. Fury. That's not really very good here. No, I think we're donezos. Alright, let's go on the play and do things a little bit differently. I'm not sure we want these forces, certainly not in these numbers. I think we do definitely want these Red Blasts. They've shown us that they've got lots of targets for that. Daze also gets way better as well. So we could cut all these and maybe trim a Daze here. Actually, I like Flusterstorm here quite a bit as well. Maybe this isn't a Sauron's Ransom game. We just want another Daze. Do want the bouncers. What do you want? Do you want to bring in... What are we running Stifles for in this matchup? It can stifle a Bowmaster trigger. That doesn't impress me much. Let's just grab Force of Will. I think that's better than a Counterbalance here. Alright, we want a turn 1 threat, please. This is not a turn 1 threat. It does deal with Hogak a little bit. Deals with thingies. Again, I think this is the acceptable side of weak, which is not really where I want it to be. But I think it's definitely turn around for us with this hand. So we're going to do the Bauble trick here. We're going to see what the top card of our library is and see if we want to keep it or not. Dragon's Rage Channeler. We very much want to keep that card. This means we can Unholy Heat, untap Dragon's Rage Channeler, plus a bunch of other cool stuff like Surge Extraction and things. A Verdant, Catacombs, and no play from our opponent. Interesting. A Wasteland. Do I think this Orcish Bowmasters, like, what are they going to do at end step? It's going to be a Thought Scour, isn't it? Is it worth getting a Bowmasters in for that? More so than getting the Channeler in. If we get the Channeler in now and we want to Lightning Bolt, we will not have any black mana. That is a very real issue. But we will have a lot of things to try and manipulate at the top of our library. I think I'm going to pass here. I think they're going to try and put a Hogak into play on the next turn, and we want to be able to Bowmasters it. The Bowmasters, the Bowmaster. Right, so they're cracking a Verdant Catacombs. A Hedron Crab. Alright. This is something we can Unholy Heat, if we so wish. So they're probably going to crack their Verdant Catacombs in response. If they have a Thought Scour, they'll also fire it off. There's a Hogak over there. Right, so we can play our Dragon's Rage Channeler, play our Wasteland, go to our opponent's draw step, and then extract the Hogak. Snuff out. So now we extract the Hogak, because then we get to Surveil here. Do I want a Force of Will on top of our library? This means if we need to Brainstorm, there's a possibility... No, we can't do it if we do the Brainstorm like this. Okay, I think it's just going into our graveyard, right? Let's get rid of these Hogaks. Stern Dismissal, Dryad Arbor, Wasteland. Let's see what else they got going on. A couple of Dark Blast. Big fan of Dark Blast. 1 Uro. Alright. And the Master of Death. So they don't have an amazing threat base left. They have a Wasteland of their own. Not a big fan of that. They are playing Loam, so it makes sense. Reanimate on a Hedron Crab. Right, they're going to mill themselves with the Crab. They're going to Wasteland our Volcanic Island. So we're going to get a Volk here and get rid of this guy. Hope we do some cool stuff with Brainstorm and friends. Right, Reanimate for them is probably going to be something that gets them the Orcish Bowmasters, which we can answer with our Orcish Bowmasters. But we will need to find a black source. Alright, we can get a threat down here. What do we have in our graveyard? We have land, creature, instant, artifact. So our Dragon's Rage Channeler will not die to a Bowmasters. Another Wasteland is really irritating for us in this situation though. I think I will go for the Channeler and then hope to untap with a Brainstorm. I don't think we're Wastelanding here. We can Wasteland our opponent off of green and just keep Uro out of play, which I think is better. So our Wasteland or Dryad Arbor, for example. Any green source will get a Wasteland. Alright, there is a Wasteland from our opponent. That is less than ideal news for us. And they can Stern Dismissal our creature so that we can't replay it. We need a land here. Goodbye, Dragon's Rage Channeler. Delver of Secrets, that's not the one. Okay. So now they'll probably just reanimate an Orcish Bowmasters or something. Or maybe they'll wait to see if we get a threat, but careful study, that's pretty tasty. See what they discard here. Oh, that second Wasteland is so backbreaking. Okay, Dryad Arbor's gone. Come on, land. It's not a land. I think we're the one getting cheesed out by Wastelands for a change. Yep, so now is going to come the Bowmasters like we suspected. Like, it makes our cantrips worse, but we're not really trying to do cantrips right now. We're trying to do all the other things I had. A Wasteland. I kind of want to have my own Bowmaster, so I don't want to Wasteland our opponent off of, like, their lands here, because I want to be able to cast Bowmasters. So we need to kind of keep the Wastelands back, because if we Wasteland and they just play a Wasteland and Wasteland us, to make sure that we can't do that. That's all, because Bowmasters is a good way of dealing with their Bowmasters and providing another little backup blocker. Alright, so they have the mana for Uro when the time comes. A Scalding Tarn. So this is an interesting question. What land do we get here? If we get the Underground Sea and deploy the Bowmasters, I think that's the best singular spell we can play here. That's what I'm going to go for. They're cleverly not cracking their fetch lands here to make it harder for us to play around Uro. Uro is not in their graveyard though. And if we can untap, we can do the Brainstorm thing. We're actually in an okay spot if we can find a red source. We've got 2 Volks left in our deck. Right, so they're cracking a green source now. That is an interesting choice. What do they do with that green mana? We're supposed to waste in combat. We found the Uro. Okay. Big chunk of life they're gaining here. We do get to kill their Bowmasters though. Their Bowmaster token. We will be hitting this. Right, don't fail me now, Brainstorm. A Daze, a Lightning Bolt. These are interesting things. I don't think I want the Fury, but the bolts can definitely come in handy. I don't hate the Delver either, but I think the Delver is the thing that goes here. We just try and close out the game in a couple of turns. So this is 3 damage. We play the DRC, and that's another 3 damage. Wasteland them off of their trop. Crack this for a Volk. Got DRC. So we have 6 damage next turn. If they crack the fetch land, either of our lightning bolts is lethal. Obviously, if they can put an Uro on the stack, then it's going to be more difficult. Ooh, a Channeler. Sure, that's 4 life. So we have lethal with this lightning bolt in our hand. If we draw another red source, we have lethal through an Uro. So they need to have a green source here. And reanimating on the Bowmasters. Sure, that's acceptable. We lose our Bowmasters. We still have a 2-2. And the red source is good too. Right, let's go to tax. Let's see what they want to do here. They're going for the double block. That's okay. Take them off of all their mana. We can beat Wasteland as well because of our Daze. We can Daze our own Lightning Bolt and pick up our land. I think we managed to squeak our way through here. Alright, they know that we've got another Lightning Bolt coming. So we finished with a 3-2, which is not an amazing record. Obviously, this deck had a pretty good finish at the weekend, so it's clearly got some good chops on it, but it did feel like some of the things we were doing didn't line up very well against what our opponents were doing. Now, we played against some of the more fringe decks, like the Mono Black Rescaminator, but that deck is growing in popularity. But I didn't feel like we had the best interaction with it as we were going. We kind of skimped on Graveyard Hate, like I said at the briefing at the start, and I kind of felt that a little bit, and we kind of tuned a bit more towards beating some of the lands decks and the Beanstalk controls, which we didn't play against. That's what the Price of Progress is for. Let's talk about the deck. So, if you watch my channel, you know that I'm more of a fan of like the sort of the rug style approach to playing Delver. Whether that be the questing druid or just going full on Canadian Threshold, which I do enjoy a great deal. But what I will say is there's some things about Grixis that I really dislike as a deck. So, Orcish Bowmasters isn't really a very good threat. So it's raised the alarm, basically, and, you know, sometimes it can shut your opponent down and do good stuff. But in terms of just having a thing that you play and try and kill your opponent with, Orcish Bowmasters is pretty poor. Which means that we don't have, like, this selection of 4 cards isn't really a good threat for us winning the game most of the time. Now, it definitely does have you sort of stuff going on, and, you know, it's clearly a great card. But in terms of us trying to win the game, I think it's limited. Now, we only have 6 1-drops, whereas some of the other decks I've played have had 8 1-drops. So you have the more reliable Delver plan where you play a threat, you start bashing your opponent for 3 from turn 2, and then you interfere with 1 or 2 of their spells that matter, and then you win the game. That line is a little bit more difficult for us to have because we are running a 2-drop threat that is not a very strong threat instead of running more Delvers. So that is definitely something to be aware of here. The other thing I don't like about this particular list is the Stifles. They were never really particularly interesting to us. Let's just put them out here. So they never really did very much for us. Now, there's definitely going to be times when they are good, but again, this is a counter spell for Leyline Binding and stuff like that, so you can keep the pressure on. That's kind of what this does. However, we didn't play against those decks, so there is definitely some matchup bias in terms of what Stifle did for us. But when I play decks with Stifle, I quite like to play a deck that has 4 Wasteland and 4 Stifle. So you're honing in a lot more on the ability to deny your opponent playing the game. And as we've seen, you know, Wastelands can just cheese out games. Destroying your opponent's land can just win you games that you maybe didn't deserve to win based on your opponent's hand. But if they can't deploy their spells, then it's lights out. So I do prefer having more Wastelands and more Stifles. I think Sauron's Ransom and Orcish Bowmasters do slow down what we're trying to accomplish as a deck a little bit, because this is a 2-drop that doesn't really clock very fast. Sauron's Ransom kind of pushes you towards having, you know, a little bit of late game stuff, whereas things like Stifle is trying to push us into the early game. So if those cards line up at the right times, then obviously we're very good. But I think there's a little bit of conflict between them in terms of how it maps out, and I think it's not the exact direction that I personally like to go. Molten Collapse is pretty cool. We never got to do anything with it, but it is a pretty cool card. I think it's a real draw to being in black in a lot of ways. If you ever get the 2-for-1 off of this, it feels amazing. But it's still perfectly viable as just 2 mana destroy creature or planeswalker, or, you know, 2 mana blow up something. But mana value 1 or less is not always going to be doing the most amount of work. Like, we definitely saw where our opponents had 2-drops that we really want to blow up. And if we were in like a, let's say a black, green, blue version of Delver, then we could have things like Witherbloom Command. Obviously, we'd have to give up the red and be quite a different deck, but there's, you know, there's a lot of Sultai decks going around. But this not blowing up Beanstalk feels a little bit worrying to me. Now, it definitely has some useful things you can do with it, and it's another sorcery which helps you get Delirium, which is, you know, sorcery is one of the harder types. We've got Lorien Revealed, we've got 4 Ponders, and we've got the Molten Collapse. So having more sorceries is definitely something I can get behind. But I did feel like our threats, like the games that we had Channelers and Delvers early were the best games. Hands down, the best things we could do was play a turn 1 threat, which makes me wonder why we're not running 8 turn 1 threats. That's just my sort of take on that, really. Now, obviously, the interesting thing about Delver decks is you make a few little changes here and there, and the deck plays quite substantially differently. Because you see so many cards when you play Delver as a general rule, it means that little tweaks you make actually have a much bigger impact. So everyone kind of has their own way that they like to play a Delver deck, and obviously Jay's build here is a build that he's been playing for a while. He knows the ins and outs of. He's got the numbers for his play style, which is something that I don't think enough people appreciate with Legacy. How you have a deck, but then the way you approach playing that deck can influence the card choices, and it's not always, strictly speaking, like a solved puzzle. Sometimes people have different ways of playing the same deck that are both viable and ends up being quite good. Now, you know, there are going to be situations where that isn't the case. You know, you're just going to be stomping people with standard Delver stuff. But I think like a lot of the small choices in this deck are going to be down to Jay putting in the work, refining the numbers, and playing to his particular playstyle, which isn't congruent with my particular playstyle of Delver. And I definitely think that there's going to be some friction with me playing a list that isn't quite tuned to the way that I like them tuned. And that's not to say that Jay's made any mistakes here. He just came second in one of the biggest tournaments of the year. So congrats to him for an excellent finish. And clearly, you know, you don't come to 2 Stifle, 2 Bauble, 1 Lorien Revealed, 2 Delver, you know, 1 Ransom, 1 Molten Collapse. You don't come to these numbers without putting in the effort and refining the numbers down in the way that you personally like, and also getting the testing so that you know how you're playing every matchup and it feels right for you. So I can't fault him for his finish. I can just say what I personally don't like about this deck in terms of the way I approach playing Delver decks, which is not to say that I approach Delver decks the right way. I approach them in a different way to some people, and you know, you'll find lots of different schools of thoughts on approaching playing the Delver matchups a bit differently. Like I said, I'm more of a Rug player than a Grixis player anyway. So that little caveat done. I'd also like to talk about the sideboard here. I did feel that we wanted more graveyard hate in this. Now, obviously, you know, matchup bias is a thing, and we played 5 rounds today. And, you know, some of our sideboard was not useful because of the matchups we played, and that is just the nature of the matchup lottery. I do like having the Devil builds that have a Grafdigger's Cage in. It just feels like a useful thing that you bring in quite often, and also spills over to Natural Order, Green Sun Zenith piles as well. So I think I would prefer to have one of these cards replaced with a Grafdigger's Cage. But other than that, I think it's relatively fine. Like Counterbalance is a card that never impresses me that much, but it's always good enough as a general rule when you're boarding it in. Like sometimes we boarded it in and it wasn't amazing. We only counted like 1 spell with it, but we also used it as a scry once. That was helpful. And in the mirror, it's going to get you quite a lot of value, and you're not going to be paying, you know, 2-for-1 stuff. I think that's all fine. I did quite like the double Hydroblast. There's been a lot more Blood Moons around lately, and I think being able to nail those is really good, especially if you don't have a basic in the deck. I don't think we should run a basic. I don't like basics in my Delver decks as a general rule. I guess if you want to try and fit in a Grafdigger's Cage, you're probably looking at somewhere among the Price of Progress or the Fury that goes. Although we do have answers for some relatively small creatures, so we kind of have the Fury angle of things covered. It's not like we're playing Beanstalk to get more value off this. So I think this is a Grafdigger's Cage be better. Obviously, Jay chose to do this for his tournament of the weekend, and it worked out really well for him. So there's also going to be an idea of knowing about the metagame in the area you're playing, or what people are, other teams might be testing and playing with. So there's so many factors that go into building a deck, especially when you build a deck for a really high-level tournament like this. But those are my takes, and obviously the meta online is a bit different as well. And I suppose you're less likely to find Reanimator decks in a big tournament like that than you are online, because people will be, okay, I've got a little bit of time, let's jam some Reanimator online. Whereas if you go to like the big tournament of the year, you're going to want to play something that you get to, have your games in and have fun with, and not just have the games over really quickly necessarily. And you're going to want, Reanimator, in my experience, isn't very fun to play. And if you're going to a big 10-round tournament to play a deck that isn't necessarily the most enjoyable thing, you're not really going to want to do that a lot of the time. Some people will, but you're not going to get people gravitating towards it. And Reanimator has kind of taken a little bit of a downward spike, so I can see why there's a little bit of skimping on Graveyard Hate, and sometimes Flusterstorm can cover that as well a little bit. But I think that's my main thing with the sideboard. I like the cross of 2 Meltdowns and 1 Null Rod, because Meltdown also answers Grafdigger's Cage. Not Grafdigger's Cage. As a Saga. Where did Grafdigger's still on their Grafdigger's Cage in my brain. Anyway, but Meltdown answers as a Saga, which is kind of, one of the scary things that can happen to you. But we only have 3 Wasteland, so we're more inclined to need some Meltdowns. I think I've broken this deck down relatively well. I'm sure there's other people who are much wiser than me, can tell you more about Grixis Delver. It's not quite my jam of the Delver world, but I think we gave a reasonable account for ourselves, and we found some certain weaknesses, as well as some obvious strengths as well. Orcish Bowmasters may not be a stellar threat, but it can completely change the dynamic of games. It certainly changed the dynamic of Legacy, and Sauron's Ransom was pretty decent for us as well. So I think the Stifle is one of those things where it didn't quite fit in with what we were doing a lot of the time, but it's very good against some combo decks. But we just didn't really get to leverage our tools as much as we liked. And some of the matchups we lost, like the Mystic Forge combo, that wasn't a million miles away from being one we won, right? we kind of had like one turn get away from us a little bit, or we missed the mana, didn't we? We missed the mana for the kill. So yeah, there is, there are pretty tight margins you're playing in quite often with Delver, and that's kind of why the deck's so exciting and fun to play, I think. All right, I think we are done for today. I've spoken about this one enough. Once again, congratulations to Jay for coming second to this tournament, and sorry we couldn't feature TK's deck that won the tournament, but Magic Online isn't giving us the Warhammer 40k cards yet, so all we can do is shrug. But I hope this still was a fun one for you and gave an insight into what was at the top of the standings of the old Eternal Weekend North America. Once again, thank you very much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, it really helps the channel out. And if you know anyone who's looking for anything to watch over Christmas, I've got plenty of content, so why not send my stuff their way. Alright, thank you once again, it really means a lot to me that you watched, and goodbye. If you'd like to support me in the channel, please check out my Patreon. It has a free guide to budget turbo depths as well as 3 tiers of support. A low cost one that enters you into my monthly raffle for a free donation deck on the channel, a mid-tier subscription that gives you access to my detailed turbo depths guide that is updated every month as well as regular articles, and lastly the higher tier gives you all of the above as well as a monthly donation deck for my channel. If you're interested in supporting the channel this way, please check out the link in the description.